Great. Well, I'll just start off by welcoming everybody that's joining us to this Health Tech Summit with the very specific subject of investment and the role it can play in helping to drive health technology and, of course, business success as well. We've got a fabulously distinguished panel today with us that bring with them a massively wide spectrum of knowledge and experience, and they're going to be discussing some of the issues that you'd like to hear about over the course of the next hour to 90 minutes or so. For all those that are joining us today, thanks for giving up your time on a Friday afternoon. What we'd really like you to do at the end of the discussion today is make sure you share this content as widely as possible. It will be available on YouTube, LinkedIn, all the social channels that you'd expect to see it featured on. So please share it as widely as possible. For those of you that aren't familiar with Health Tech World, it is quite simply the leading multimedia platform for all those with a professional interest in health technology. And this is one of a series of discussions we've been hosting on areas that our readers and users are particularly interested in. If you've got any questions today for our panelists, please stick them in chat and I'll do my best to make sure that the panelists get a chance to consider those questions and respond to them. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and say a little bit about who they are, what they do, and the organisations that they're involved with, or the sectors that they're involved with as well. So if I can maybe start with you, George, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hi there, everyone. My name is George Frodshim. I'm the founder and CEO of MediSieve. We're a biotech company based in London, and we have a platform technology that has quite a broad range of different clinical applications, both in terms of directly treating disease and enabling other therapies to be safer and more effective. So it's a preclinical technology. We're a university startup, but we are just about to enter clinical trials, and we have been going for 7 years. And in that time, we've had 3 different investments, 3 different experiences. And so I'm really coming from that side of a startup, but going from, never having raised any money before to where we are today, which is we're looking to do an £8 million Series A, and we've got 14 employees developing and validating our platform. So hopefully I can provide some interesting insights kind of on that side of the equation. And yeah, really looking forward to the conversation today with everyone else as well.
Great, thanks for that, George. If I can come to you next, Fern, please.
Certainly. Good morning, everyone, because it is morning here in New York. My name is Fern Lazar, and I'm a managing partner at Finn Partners, which is a global communications consultancy. I've been in the field of investor relations, I don't even want to say how long, but helping innovative companies gain access to capital, and also counseling them over the way in terms to sort of navigate the vicissitudes of the capital markets, because we know that they're not always so agreeable. And my communications background helps me to counsel companies to really tell their story in a way that resonates with all different levels of investors and distinguishes them from other companies in the crowded field. So I actually started out my career as a commodities trader, actually working for a British group, and have also been an economist as well. So that has helped me really understand the priorities of investors. So I'm delighted to speak with you all here today, and I'll represent the sort of counseling side of this field. Thank you.
Thank you, Fern. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Dwek. I'm based in London. I'm a corporate financier with over 35 years experience working with international companies and investors. And I've closed over $16 billion of deals over my short career. So I've got a bit of experience in raising money, the options for companies, managing investors, working with investors. I've been on both sides of the table. And working with Tyson and Blake, that I've known some of the senior partners for a few years, this is a slightly different type of investor. It's a corporate venturing company based in Sweden and the UK, and we're a small group of experienced individuals focusing on digital health investments. And what we do differently to other groups is that we really work with companies at an early stage to add strategic value to the investments, to help them think globally about their marketing strategies, their partnerships, and preparing them for the next round of investment. I, in my role as CIO and advisor to these companies, can add value in that preparation phase. So, such as George said, getting ready for a Series A, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of preparation, and you have to get it right and communicate, as Fern said, effectively to all the investor base. We've got some very interesting companies in our portfolio, but a very small group of companies so that we can really add value. One of them is an Australian business called Strongroom, which is managing adverse drug events through a medication platform using AI, and we're really helping them to develop their business and to get ready for a Series A funding. We've got companies in Sweden such as Quality Pharma, which has a database of adverse drug reaction events for different drugs. So this helps pharmacies and medical professionals to really see the effect of a potential drug and what negative effect it could have on a patient. This can save the health authorities a lot of money. We have an investment in a company called Mindberry that has a group of therapists on their platform, and they provide therapy and coaching to investors. So those are the types of businesses that we get involved in, and we look to really add strategic value to them.
Thanks very much, David. Matty.
Hi, Alistair. Thank you, and good afternoon, morning, or evening to everyone here, depending on where you are in the world. Personally, I'm based here in Tel Aviv. As Alistair mentioned, my name is Mati. I have the honor to be able to lead a very new innovation lab, which is backed by some of the best partners in the industry. We are in the field of drug discovery and development for computational-based or artificial intelligence-based companies that use new technologies that are computational-based, as mentioned, for drug discovery and development. The partners that formed AION Labs, that are our backers, are 4 pharma companies, all working together as equal partners. They include Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Merck out of Germany, and Teva out of Israel, as well as the Israel Biotech Fund to bring in the expertise of early stage investors, both access to capital, but really more importantly, as was mentioned by David earlier, the expertise needed to build highly attractive companies that will be fundable down the road. And they have a unique position to be able to provide that expertise, as well as our computational and cloud-based life sciences partner, Amazon Web Services, that our partners chose to work hand in hand as an equal partner in developing these new technologies. We adapted a model for venture creation that's been tried and successfully over the last 10 years in the biotech space, based out of Germany from an institute called BioMedX, where we basically focus on first, what is an unmet need that our pharma companies identify that if solved through computational techniques could become a very viable, lucrative, impactful for patients and for the industry startup, which we then take for global crowdsourcing, find the best talents, whether from Israel or from abroad, bring them to Israel, test them out over a 5-day boot camp where we don't let them sleep and test them out for many different capabilities and parameters. And at the end of that, we select the founder and then give them all the support needed and up to 4 years to develop their technology and launch it for success. So we create through that model 4 to 6 new companies per year, and happy to be part of this and to discuss this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matty. And last but not least, James.
Thanks, Alistair, and hello to everybody wherever you are. As you can probably tell from my background, I'm based in London. I'm James Paton-Philip. I'm a partner at Hill Dickinson, which is a law firm. I'm a corporate partner, which means that I advise the relevant stakeholders, whoever that might be, whether that's the company or the founders or the investors, depending on exactly who we're acting for, mostly in relation to investment rounds, negotiating the money that comes in from the likes of Fern and so on, and sitting alongside David and teams such as that to ensure that the money comes into the company in an appropriate way that is protecting the relevant stakeholders, and then sitting alongside the company, if we're acting for the company, up to a sale opportunity or an IPO. Something that's important to understand about Hill Dickinson is that we have a very, very well-known health practice. So we act the likes of the NHS, one of our biggest clients. So we know exactly how all the commercial contracts should be set up when you're looking to do business with healthcare institutions, and that's the sort of the particularly additional extra that we can bring to health tech in particular.
Thanks very much, James. If we can kick off the discussion, and I'll maybe ask you to do that, David, by talking a little bit about the role of investment in the health tech ecosystem and how crucial it is, and possibly touching on the role of investors, not just providing access to finance, but the wider role that they play in adding value to businesses and technologies it develops.
Okay. Let me start off with a little bit of background. Clearly, the markets at the moment are very volatile, as we can see. Certainly in the technology sector, we've seen some write-downs in valuation. Some companies that floated last year are 75% off their peaks. So clearly, in the general tech sector, there has been a sell-off. We don't know how long that will last for, but everyone's catching their breath after the sharp rises of a few years ago, of the last few years. Now, more importantly for health tech, though, this has been very much a growing sector. I think last year, $15 billion of funding was raised for health tech, and Matty will also know, as I was in Israel last week and I saw some investors, a couple of new funds in the health tech space have also recently been launched in Israel or have done follow-on funds. So there's new money going into the sector as we speak. The COVID effect, post-COVID, the move to digital health, the use of AI techniques, all these factors are really important for investors. And the other thing that we've seen with health tech is that it is undervalued vis-a-vis other IT and software as a service type businesses on the technology side. So there is an impetus from investors to look at this sector. There is money available, but the key point is, how are you going to attract that money, as George has to do and many of the other businesses at an earlier stage of development have to do. And the key point is giving the investors comfort that there is really a market for the product. Now, sales clearly are the test bed. There are many competitors often doing the same thing or something very similar. You have to prove it in the market. Certainly on drug discovery, it's going to be a longer process than, for example, a software solution. But showing validation through pilots, through partnerships with bigger companies, all these elements are really important to validate that your product as a company and entice investors to put money in. The other key point is expectation management, and Fern will understand this very well. We have seen over the years, and I've seen it with many companies, that in order to achieve valuations and to get investors to sign on the dotted line, companies put very high expectations for progress, development, patents, sales, etc., etc. And it's really important to manage everyone's expectations, to communicate clearly with investors, and even if there is bad news, to communicate that quickly. But keeping the expectations low and beating them in the long run is the way to enhance your value, rather than having a 75% write down in your next round of funding. So preparation is key. Where the investors can really help the companies is on partnerships, on preparation for the next round of funding, and taking a global view. Often the company is very focused on the day-to-day work, and the investor can come in and take a global perspective, particularly on marketing. And we've done that with one of our companies called Strongroom from Australia, where their first focus was on Australia, and they've won some great contracts with the health services in Australia for their anti-opioid programs, etc., on adverse drug events. And now we've got them to start focusing on the UK, on Europe, and the US. So before Series A, which will hopefully come in the next few months, the company has got sales, it's expanding internationally, we're helping them to broaden their partnerships, and that is the way to get investors interested. You want investors to call you first, rather than you having to call them. When they start calling you, you know that the name's going, it's getting noticed in the market.
Thanks, David. Lots of good advice and insight there. Matty, you're doing this day in, day out as well. Some thoughts?
So yeah, we've seen that there's been a challenge for many investors, and as David mentioned, some are coming from outside the field as technology is increasingly connecting with bio, and as the tech is becoming more of a part of the biotech equation. So we're seeing investors that don't necessarily have the expertise in biotech. So we feel that from our perspective, what we can do best as a foundry, as a venture creation studio, is to help these early stage founders of new startup companies to work with pharma hand in hand as partners, and that if they have the backing and the quote unquote validation of the pharma companies that their product does have a product market fit, that there's a need for it, that there's an unmet need it can address, and it's been able to show some somewhat promising results, that could help investors then to gain a level of confidence that the technology can potentially work, as well as will have a need and a customer base, which in the pharma industry at least is relatively very narrow. And to David's point, this could take a while to bring an actual product to market, but the more you bring in artificial intelligence, you could actually speed up that process by either making the product a platform technology-based product and then spinning off multiple different products into that, or actually just speeding up the whole process of discovery of a new target and new antibodies, or the way that we actually develop drugs. So from our perspective, what we're trying to do is bring in the pharma expertise as partners from day one, and that will then, and while still building a strong network of investors both within the pharma world and outside of it, so that we can make our companies attractive, and that the investors will have a lot of confidence that there is a need for what they have to offer, and that they have the right technological and biological capabilities to be able to deliver.
Thanks, Matty. Thoughts, Fern?
Yeah, I concur with my colleagues on the call today, and I want to touch on something that Matti just alluded to. So we have seen, many types of investors pour into the health market over the last couple of years, especially during COVID, as we all know. Now, not everybody knows healthcare in the same way that everybody else does. And I think we are seeing the shakeout from those general investors suddenly coming to realize that they really don't understand what they're involved in. And so that is reflected both in the IPO market and in the SPAC market. And I think what it underscores is for new companies that are looking for investors, you really want to partner with investors that understand what you do, that understand the health market. It is unlike any other market. There's no other market where you have to rely on external physicians and academic medical centers to actually prove that your drug works. There's just nothing like it. So unless you are part of that world and you understand, again, the vagaries of the market and all the things, especially like in biotech, that you need to go through, then I think you really have to you really have to be very sort of adamant about finding the right partner, because your early stage investors are with you for a long time. It's like a marriage. So I don't have to say anything more. We know what it's like. We have to be married to the right person. So what you really want to do is do your homework, and the money seems easy, but it's not easy when you wake up next to somebody that may not be the same person that you thought they were. So so that's one point. I think that the other very interesting entrant into the market, especially in digital health, are the health systems and providers. And I think that what we'll start to see is this all the digital health technology sort of cleave into two different segments. So those focused on wellness and sort of monitoring, and also testing, sort of more patient oriented, and those that are attached to healthcare systems where you have lots of technologies that are going to make the provider's life easier through AI, big data, whatever it is. And so I think that we'll start to see more and more providers enter and they are raising a lot of money, as everyone knows, lots of money, and they're good partners because it allows digital health companies to kind of test drive their products and have a ready market for commercialization. So I would say as early stage companies are looking for investors, they're a good partner to go to. And again, I thank you, David, for talking about expectations. Yes, the old adage in investor relations is understate, outperform. And so that never changes, really. You don't, I always like to tell our clients that you compete against yourselves when you raise your expectations unduly. There's nobody else expecting you to say what you're doing except for you. So you might as well keep the bar to, well, I don't want to say low, but meet your, set reasonable expectations and then outperform them. If people say, my God, that's a good management team, they really deliver on what they say. Because once you lose the confidence of investors, it's very hard to get it back. So yeah, so those are, I think, some of my observations.
Thanks, Fern. I think that's sorry, were you going to come in there? There was just a bit of an echo there. Yeah, I think that's a good ethic for life generally: understate and overperform. Fern, George, you've seen this from the other end of the telescope because you've been, I think, as an early stage business pursuing investment. Your perspective will be really interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, several thoughts. I don't disagree with anything that's been said so far, and obviously, the idea of an investor and investee relationship being like a marriage is very true. But you do hope that ultimately there's light at the end of the tunnel. There will be an amicable and very rewarding separation at the end, if you see what I mean. So, in terms of the value an investor can bring beyond money. I think that's super important, particularly, you know, for someone like myself who's got into this with basically no industry experience behind me. And this was a university spin-out company, and you know, my only job before this was as a receptionist and a waiter, you know. So you know, definitely the investors who are on board, you're on the same side. Everyone wants the company to be successful, and you can learn a lot from them, and you want, particularly early days, for investors to get involved. And I think the flip side is what makes it challenging is you know, when you're fundraising and going out looking for money, you know, it can be tough from the entrepreneur's point of view. You know, you get a lot of no's, you get a lot of rejection inevitably, and you have to kiss a lot of frogs, as the saying goes. So it can be difficult if someone does put an offer in front of you to turn it down because you want a different investor with different background and different experience. But I think sometimes you absolutely have to have the courage to do that, and not be desperate, so desperate for the money that you get into bed with the wrong people. So I think that's very important. One surprising thing I think that I found is that the process of fundraising can be very, very informative and very valuable, even if the answer at the end is no, because they're not interested. And you know, we did a lot of work listening to the feedback of investors, trying to understand why the investors that we thought should be really interested in what we had to offer weren't necessarily coming back, you know, with offers when we expect them to. And that can be really valuable in terms of informing your messaging. How are you getting your story across? How are you pitching the company, and where you are and where you want to get to? And what are the common questions that always come up? What are the common concerns that always come up? But even beyond that, the strategy itself, because, you know, ultimately there's usually several ways to skin a cat, and there's usually several ways to bring a company, a concept, an idea from where it is today to success. And success can look different for different companies. Success can look different even for the same company. And getting your vision of success aligned with the investor's vision of success, I think, is absolutely crucial for you to build a relationship that's going to enable you to actually work together. And you can do a lot of that by speaking to the market early. And so that's definitely a piece of advice I would give to any entrepreneur who's in those early stages is, you know, don't be afraid to have a conversation with an investor, even if you strongly suspect that you're probably not at the right stage, because chances are you'll go back to them in 18 months to 2 years' time and say, hey, look, we spoke then, timing wasn't right. I remembered that you had, you know, concerns around how we were going to commercialize, or what the design of our clinical studies were, or thought we were missing this element of the team. Well, look, actually, we've progressed this in the way we thought we would. You know, here's a challenge that we didn't expect that we overcame. Here's how we've addressed the feedback that you gave us. And now we're doing another round. Do you want to come in? And the technology's de-risked. And I think that can lead to success, because that relationship is built over the years, and that reputation, the company reputation, is built over the years. You know, the same investors see you on the circuit, hear from you, hear your updates, and it's a small world. You know, you guys all know each other, all the investors, and so I think all of those things are really important to help you as you go on.
Thanks very much, George. James, as a partner in a commercial and corporate law firm dealing with lots of these transactions, your thoughts on investor relationships and how they can be developed in a way that allows people to extract the greatest dividend, not just financially?
Yeah, Alistair, look, I mean, first of all, I absolutely reiterate everything that all the speakers have said so far, because it all rings very true. You know, I was at a biotech conference earlier in the week, and there were a number of young businesses there that were looking to raise various different levels of funding, and a lot of them, you know, particularly the ones looking for their seed, their initial funding, were saying that actually just getting the the first, they may have 3 or 4 different investors who are all sort of there, sort of ready and waiting to go in many ways, but actually getting the first investor to make that first move. Because once you've got the first move, once somebody has come off the fence, then it's often the case that the other investors, particularly if you've got some investors who aren't necessarily that knowledgeable of the particular space that you talked earlier about, sometimes there are investors who don't necessarily fully understand the product that actually you're bringing to the market. But once that first investor has come off the fence, you'll often find it's easier for the others to do so as well. Get that cornerstone investor as soon as you can. Do what you can to get that cornerstone off the fence. And the other thing to say is, once you've got one term sheet, once you've got an offer there, again, it gives you a lot of confidence, and you can, and other investors will again understand that, okay, well, look, this has been looked at already. Somebody's shown interest. This business has an offer already. They'll probably come at you with a slightly different perspective than if you don't have anything in your back pocket already. I'd also say that the type of investors is definitely broadening and widening out. We're seeing a lot more private family offices, for example, coming into the space and doing more and more. And that possibly can come with a bit of a lack of understanding of particular specialisms or products that are coming out. And the last thing I'd say is that, really reiterating what somebody else said earlier about valuation, don't go and set yourselves up with too high a valuation at the outset. Don't try and push for too high a valuation, because at the end of the day, get the money in at a decent valuation. Don't get too hung up on it, because you'll find perhaps that it puts too much pressure on you to raise at a valuation in your next round that is higher than your initial valuation, and can cause some problems later on down the line, where you have perhaps anti-dilution rights and so on if you end up raising it at a lower valuation, although hopefully you shouldn't be doing that, and it should be an upwards trajectory. And finally, perhaps, is just, again, think about the investors from a human angle. You're going to be sitting alongside these investors for some time. It's not just, do they have, are they specialists in investing in this space? That's obviously key, but think about the human angle. Can I actually work alongside this particular investor for years to come? I think George mentioned it, rather like a marriage in many ways, and it really can be. So the more you can click, and of course they'll be looking for the same, the investors will be looking for absolutely the same. The more you can click with those investors, the better.
Thanks, James. An interesting point about the chemistry between those seeking investment and investors. And also there's clearly a big spectrum of people that may be potential investors. Is it really important, given the deeply technical nature of this sector, that you find investors who understand it and who can provide intellectual capital and strategic capital, if you like, for sometimes relatively inexperienced businesses? Is that important? Any thoughts on that from anybody?
I could say 2 things on that. I think, first of all, those that really understand the space of health tech and biotech and pharma will normally have the patience and the long-term view, which is required in our industry versus other tech industries.
Yeah.
If they really understand our industry, they're not going to be expecting an early exit or return at an early stage. And I think that's key for an early stage startup, to be able to have investors that have their back, understand they're going to go through some trials, that biology doesn't always work the way you plan it, and that they're really going to have a long-term view at that point. I think that's key for the investors and for the founders. And I think for founders, one of the most important decisions they're going to make is who their early stage investors are. So really, to do that due diligence well on the investors, to understand who they are and what they're capable of bringing to the table, and that their expectations are aligned with how you want to build your company.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what Matti said. Absolutely. Particularly in this market, it is really important. when the market was flying high, it's easy to pull in a lot of investment, and people, you know, they say that your investors will say that they truly understand what you do, but as Mati said, particularly on the product side or pharma biotech side, there's lots of things that happen, you know, both from drug development, manufacturing, all aspects of being on the innovation side in healthcare that again do not face other industries. They just won't understand. Even if you come in from the technology investment side, there's no such thing as the FDA, you know, for a Logitech, right? That doesn't ever come into the equation when they're looking to develop a product. So I think it really is important. Yes, you getting the money is important, but truly finding a partner who can also add value, as I think David mentioned as well, because you can't do it alone, right? Nobody knows everything, and the more advice you can get from seasoned partners who have been in the trenches before, who can bring in other consultants and other partners to invest in you, I think, you know, those traditional players will be the ones to turn to. And again, I reiterate, especially in this tough market. So.
Absolutely, and just to add to that, Fern, you know, the way you describe, you know, it's partners. It is partners. It's not, you know, the people who are putting money into your business are your partners, and they are sitting alongside you. You're all vested in the same way, and it's really important to remember that. But it is also easy for you know, if the partner doesn't have the relevant experience and therefore doesn't go into the relevant investment round with their eyes fully open, that can easily cause tensions later down the line. Yeah.
If I can add one thing, clearly partnerships with investors are key, but what the other key point that the investors will be looking at is the team. The team of founders and advisors is really important. If they have sufficient experience, maybe if they've done a previous startup and have had an exit, or at least one of the parties has, if they've been able to grow a business, if they've been able to meet targets and expectations, that will give a lot of comfort. And it's up to the founders to really not feel as though they have to do everything on their own, but to bring in a broad group of people to support them. And this is an area where the investors can really help to enhance the team, to diversify the team, to make the company into an attractive investment proposition. So the team is absolutely key.
Thanks, David. Can we talk a little bit about different forms of investment, possibly emerging new models of investment, particularly for those businesses that may just be starting this journey? I don't know, Fern, if you'd like to say something about different forms of investment and investment models, and then, you know, we'll open it up to everybody else.
I think I will pick up on something I mentioned before, which is looking at partnering with health systems, particularly for those in the digital health space, not talking about biotech, medtech really, but I think they're not only great partners in terms of having a ready market for your product, but they also have an expert council of advisors with doctors being able to actually tell you what is right or wrong with your technology and how it enhances or does not enhance the delivery of care. And so I would say that increasingly over the last several years, and they're doing it for a reason too, they're trying to diversify their own revenues because they realized during COVID that healthcare delivery wasn't exactly all it should be, given some of the undue pressures of COVID. And so there more and more we're seeing payers, we're seeing providers raising money and investing, particularly I would say in health tech, that they can bolt on to the care process and improve economics, lessen the pressure on their doctors, improve understanding of the patients, and just, and also, of course, enhance their revenue streams. So I think I would say for me, that is the sort of the new game in town in terms of an investor selection. There's still the usual suspects, right, that enter into the fray. And I think also you'll find that if you have a technology that's geared to a particular disease state, that many of the patient advocacy groups are raising money to invest in drugs or technologies that also enhance the lives of those that they serve. So I would say to start looking at those as maybe unconventional sources, going back to our early point about having investors that understand the space. Yes, patient advocacy groups and the doctors who advise them definitely do. So I would say those two groups are perhaps new entrants on the horizon.
Thanks, Fern. David?
I'm trying to think what else we can say with regard to investors and engaging with them. I think from a company's perspective, the open communication with investors is very important. And as I mentioned before, even if there's bad news, there's delays, as Matt said, that there's going to be periods, particularly in the long process of drug development and discovery, where there's going to be hiccups, and building that partnership and relationship is going to be really key. Preparation also, and this is again an area where investors can help the company to prepare, to professionalize, not to become bureaucratic, but to act a bit more like a big business, so that when something comes up, whether it's a strategic partnership, a potential M&A transaction, or the next funding round, the company is ready to go. Especially in markets as they are today, you don't know when that window is going to come, and therefore you need to be ready. And preparation is absolutely key, and something where the investors can really guide that founding team to be ready to execute when the time is right.
Okay, thanks, David. James, I'm assuming that corporate venturing is a big presence in this sort of investment ecosystem with reference to health tech?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it certainly is. So by that, you mean large corporates having their venture arms putting funding into businesses? Absolutely, and we're seeing a lot of that with particularly the larger rounds. And I think of the top 10 health tech companies in the UK, a large majority of them have investment from corporate venture arms. The other thing I'd just touch on perhaps is something that we're not really seeing much of in the UK, but I'd be interested to hear what Fern and others have to say, and Matty have to say overseas in relation to revenue-based investments. And obviously with healthcare and perhaps more so biotech, the revenue perhaps is something that is often very much delayed. But is there something that is that something that you're seeing much of at the moment in the US? So that's to be clear to everyone listening, that's more of a focus on the revenue that's coming out of the business as opposed to a pure exit at some point through a sale or IPO of some sort. Often these sorts of models, as I understand it, can be more popular with the likes of impact investments, where perhaps there isn't natural sale opportunity down the line.
Thanks, James. Matty, any thoughts on different forms of investment and emerging models that might be a little less traditional? Is there much going on in Israel or globally that you're spotting?
Yeah, so I think in Israel, we're seeing a growth in the AI for health tech area. Israel has been very classically strong in fields of artificial intelligence and computational technologies across all sectors. And probably the last to catch on in Israel is the health tech industry. We've been able to grow great cyber companies, fintech companies, even automotive companies. Israel tried and failed twice to build two companies that would build cars. We even had Tesla before there was Tesla with Better Place with electric cars. Both of those attempts crashed very magnanimously. But the automotive industry in Israel is very strong because you have around 600 startup companies all in the field of AI to make a car a better car, more safer, faster, more efficient, sustainable, etc. And for all across the automotive industry. And you have all the automotive global leaders in Israel trying out new models to either form companies, invest in companies, pilot with companies at a very early stage. And what we're trying to do in health tech is kind of copy some of those capabilities, because Israel will probably never be a world leader in manufacturing of a new drug. We're a high cost country with low efficiency in manufacturing. That's just not really what we do well here in Israel, and we're far from the market. So, being the US or Europe is the key market. So what Israel's trying to do right now is bring in AI, which Israel's strong in, to the health tech sector, but that requires a lot of expertise, which doesn't yet exist in Israel, which is why we at AION Labs, and there's many other such consortiums that are trying to bring in the expertise from global pharma companies, investors that have actually done this before, do this for a living. They bring in the global market expertise to be able to guide these founders, whether they come from Israel or from abroad, and provide them with all the right expertise. So the way we work in AION Labs, just as an example, is we work in a model where we start with a challenge and we say, this is a challenge that needs to be solved using AI technology. There's nothing out there on the market. And if you're able as a founder to come solve this scientifically, we will remove all the barriers to help you succeed. So we'll say, you focus on the science, we'll bring in the funding, we'll help you build a fundable company. We will bring you the expertise from our pharma companies and guide you through the processes, meet with you systematically throughout that. And that's a model we truly believe in. We have a lot of support also from the Israeli government, because I think without that initial funding from the government, it would be hard to attract private sector capital there. So it makes it more attractive for the multinationals to come in. And that's something you're seeing both within our lab, but also other models that exist here in Israel. Roche and VC called AION started an accelerator called Starfinder, where they're able to pilot with new health tech companies and diagnostics companies using AI technologies in a 7-month program. So it's a shorter program than what we offer. And you're seeing a lot of that happening, where you're bringing in very strategic partners and large corporations and their R&D experts to partner with these founders from day one at a stage where you normally would not see R&D working with startups much earlier than you would see down the road. I think it's one of the reasons for that is that AI technologies and tech technologies in the pharma and health tech world, it's not in the DEA of these large pharma companies and healthcare companies. So they really want to get in as early as possible to gain trust in the technology that's being developed, and to really be there to understand it, to learn it, to help guide them in the right direction, but also to learn from them what their technology and how it's based, so that they can trust it down the road and then invest in it or acquire it or work with it later on.
Thanks, Matty. Fern, did you want to come in there?
I did, yeah. Just I feel that this discussion would be remiss if we did not touch upon another looming giant source of capital in this segment, and that, Alistair, those are the likes of Amazon and Google, and particularly in the US, the retailers. We're seeing Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, all entering into this space more, of course, on the wellness side. But I think that the ultimate proof of their commitment to this particular market is the fact that Google actually hired the FDA's head of digital health just the other day. And so if we think that those folks are not serious about getting into this business, well, I think that just underscores the fact that they are committed. So I think that opens up the door for some types of digital health company because they're more focused on the wellness side. Some of them are talking about clinical trials and making those easier from a decentralized clinical trial point of view. So I think that for young companies, if you have more on the wellness side of the spectrum, those could be a good partner for you.
Great, thanks for that, Fern. That's an interesting development. George, can I put you on the spot a little bit and say, we're all keen to see early stage innovation and early stage companies being encouraged so that they flourish. If there were one or two things, given your experience, that you would like to see more of or less of, barriers being removed or opportunities being more accessible in terms of the sort of environment you'd be working in, what would you like to see change? It was interesting to hear Matty talking about government involvement in Israel. I know that some universities are now investing as well as encouraging innovation. What do you think would help early stage innovation and early stage companies in this space a little more?
Well, I mean, that's a big question, because I think, there's lots. Okay, so my perspective is very UK based. There's lots that's done right, and there's lots that could be improved. And I'm guessing that that's probably the same around the world. What I noticed the most in the UK is how far we lag behind the US. And in pretty much every category, number of investments, size of investment rounds, evaluations, availability of grants, because almost all UK government funding, direct funding for companies in the UK is through grants. We've secured a lot of them, and they're great. There's tax relief schemes as well for early stage investors, which are very helpful to drive investment. But as far as I know, so far, there's limited involvement in terms of sort of direct investment there. I think particularly in biotech, you still have valleys of death. So you still have phases in the funding cycle where options are limited, and certainly demand for capital seems to be exceeding supply. And how many VCs or investors have said to you, "Oh, I get 1,000 opportunities come across my desk, and we'll invest in 50 of them in a year." To me, when I hear that, I understand the message is, that you've got to be up there, you've got to be the best. But the message is also, wow, there's a huge amount of demand for capital that some investors can't necessarily keep up with. From a personal experience, at MediSieve, what we're doing is pretty different. It's pretty unique, and we don't neatly fit into a little box. And my personal frustration is that too many investors have too many little boxes, right? And I get it, because you've got this massive deal flow. You kind of need an easy process to go, no, you're out of scope, or it's too big, or it's too early, or it's not quite, our area of speciality. But I think when you have something that's truly novel, truly new, groundbreaking, and disruptive, and a big step forward in innovation, that's the sort of company and project that society surely wants investors to embrace as high risk, yes, but world-changing opportunities. And it strikes me that particularly in the biotech and medtech sectors, there's a little bit of perhaps, people are maybe a bit more conservative and like to go into areas that they know, and perhaps a little bit less groundbreaking because of the fear of how big are the clinical trials going to need to be, how many risks are there in this tech to actually bring it all the way all the way to human. Whereas in maybe in the tech world, the risk is a little bit lighter, and particularly in the States, you've got far more investors who are willing to pour actually huge amounts of money into pre-revenue companies based on a belief of on the model and the vision that they're trying to create. And you know, sometimes that doesn't work out, right? But sometimes it goes fantastically well, and you do end up with these mammoth giants that you know, that have influence on how we all live our lives. And if we could bring more of that mentality, I think, into the UK and particularly into this sector, and maybe there's a role that government can play in that. Maybe there's a role that impacts investors, particularly family offices, you know, the high net worths who can bring big capital and who have the opportunity to perhaps partner with the people who have the mind and the knowledge and the know-how to select some winners from these pools of very innovative and disruptive technologies. I think we'd have fewer companies you know, failing or struggling or not really getting off the ground. So I mean, that's one area, I think, but there's always more I think can be done to drive investments, and I think broadly people have good intentions around that.
That's a great answer, George. Thank you. I know that the view will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction globally, but any more thoughts on that from anybody?
Just to add, perhaps, that I agree, you know, George, there should be more done from government. We can always say that, but I think that there should be, particularly in this sector, given that it's such a sector that's of huge importance to society, and whether that's through some sort of additional match funding or whatever, when it comes to private investment, I think government does need to step up and ensure that there is more money around for this. I think there also needs to be a bit more of a focus on sub-verticals. So, you know, actually get more granular and get more specialized. And again, this topic came up at the biotech conference earlier in the week. People were saying exactly this: there needs to be more specialization in accelerators and the like, so that there is, because it's all very well giving, you know, a health tech and you know, overarching sort of umbrella, but then, and there are some sub-verticals that are coming out, of course there are, but there needs to be more of that and more of a focus on exactly what the companies are doing.
Thanks, James. Jamey from Startup Health has just joined us. Welcome, Jamey. We've covered a lot of ground already, Jamey, and I know you weren't able to join us at the start of the call, but maybe you could just sort of introduce yourself, say what you do. We've talked quite a bit about new and emerging models for investment. Maybe once you've introduced yourself, you could say something about that, and then we'll go back to the main panel.
Sure, absolutely. And sorry to be a little bit behind schedule. I think I messed up my time conversion in Pacific time here in Los Angeles. But good morning to everybody, or I guess afternoon, midday, wherever you may be. Yeah, so look, I think it's interesting. I'm sitting in a new seat than I did before. I'm an entrepreneur who founded 2 different healthcare companies, both of which were funded, the last one with $35 to $40 million of capital. And now I'm sitting in a seat at Startup Health, which is, you know, probably the largest digital health innovation ecosystem right now in healthcare. We have 300 plus portfolio companies. The portfolio value is, you know, worth around $27 billion as it stands today. And we are seed, early, and Series A investors who also do follow-on investing for the companies that we see getting traction. And when you take a look at what's happening, at least here in the United States, you know, we're at the very early innings of a digital transformation in the healthcare system, with a long way to go. And taking a look at the public markets today, you know, some people might be shaken by that. We are not. We remain incredibly bullish on the future of investment in digital health globally. And I think there's a tremendous amount of innovation coming down the pipe. And our accelerator model. We look very much like a Y Combinator, but focused on digital health. So I heard, kind of a comment before about, having more specialized accelerators. I mean, that's what we do. Ours are centered around different moonshots. So we have 14 moonshots as it stands today. It started off with increasing access to care, decreasing the cost of care to zero. And the latest ones have been more disease focused, ending cancer, doing things like focusing on Alzheimer's, focusing on diabetes, which are the most recent two that we have launched. And I think from our standpoint, we'd love the opportunity to put even more money to work than we currently do in our deals, and support our entrepreneurs even more. And I think there is now such a more collaborative process that's happening between investors and the companies themselves versus just being capital. And that process has been in motion for a long time. But now, even at the earlier stages, my job at Startup Health is to focus on the platform, focus on the portfolio, and figure out how we can best help our companies. And I think that's the model that gets me excited, because out of that collaboration comes better value creation.
Thanks very much, Jamey. It's interesting that Jamey mentions there quite how bullish he's feeling about investment. And I think those people that aren't close to the sort of investment market might feel a little bit shaky about the global climate. I think that was something that you touched on as well, David. Is that generally the feeling that investment and the robustness of that investment in health tech feels, in reasonably good shape despite the headwinds globally?
Yes, if I can just reiterate that, what Jamey has said. Yes, we're all suffering from higher inflation. The stock markets have fallen significantly. There's lots of uncertainty from Ukraine, Brexit, supply side shocks, etc., the fear of recession. However, as we mentioned before, a lot of money has gone into digital health funds, not only in digital health, but in tech in general. Investors will want to deploy that capital with the right teams, with the right companies that can really show progress. And I think that with COVID having happened, with this move towards more efficiencies in the health service, we've had a paradigm shift in health. People have been much more willing to accept change, especially in the health services, etc., and are more open to embracing new technologies. And I think that will allow new companies to come up and to sell their services more actively, hopefully more quickly, and for these new services to be accepted into the market more quickly, which will spur on more and more investment. So yes, the environment is difficult. It's always challenges. If we look back over the last 20 years, every few months there's another crisis. So we've got used to crises and managing those. And the investment community also has. It takes a longer term view, particularly in health. Just build the right team, product, and have a product that is different to everyone else's with a real added value, and that will raise the necessary funding to take it to the next stage.
Thanks, David. I think that's a very encouraging and positive note on which to maybe start to move towards a summary. If I could start with you, Fern, it'd be nice to go around all of our panelists and just hear a few words of advice, maybe from lessons that you've learned or things you've observed, that you would give to people seeking investment, whether it's an early stage business or a more mature business branching into new markets or with new products. Those things that people need to keep in mind as they're seeking investment or developing relationships with investors.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. Yeah, this is, I think we're in the middle of a sea change in terms of the market maturing, actually. So Digital health was in its infancy. It was there was lots of cool gee whiz technologies that bamboozled and captured investor imagination. But we're in a stage now, like every market, and I've been in healthcare investing a long time. I've seen the biotech market shake out a bit and become more mature, and med tech, et cetera. But I think what we're seeing is investors want to see companies present. We've all talked about this today. Their business models. How are you going to make money, and who are you going to partner with? And as part of that process, to bring in validators. You know, there's nothing that works better in terms of gaining confidence that pulling in people that are outside your company that can actually validate both your technology, the market size, and the unmet need. So I think the more you can sort of remember that that you don't have to do this alone, that you can call in some of your physician contacts, those that are connected with your technology, to help build your story, that will make it easier for investors. And I think also that, you know, we want to remind ourselves that investors are looking for clear metrics of your success. So don't boil the ocean. Really focus on creating those milestones that can be measured. And then when you go back to them a year later, if they didn't invest in you the first time, you can say, look, I told you I was going to do that, and I did it. We did it all together. And I think the importance of showcasing the management's expertise as well is super important. I know that that several people on this call raised that as a primary component of success. So yeah, so I think that it's going to be an exciting time. It's going to be a bit. It's not going to be as heady as it was the last couple of years. Throughout healthcare, we will find more discerning investors. I was at a conference last week where we had a lot of big pharma folks talking about their views on M&A, and unfortunately, they're becoming more discerning too. They're going to be delaying their acquisition processes until they can see a little bit further clinical evidence. They're going to want to be, again, more discerning about who they take on in terms of, this was the first time I ever heard this mentioned, looking at a company's culture and whether or not it would match their culture. Because they've realized through fits and starts that acquiring companies that don't fit into their own culture means that as soon as the deal closes, all those entrepreneurs walk out the doors. So they're trying to figure out a way to keep those folks so that they can motivate them to continue to innovate. So I think that's also, it presents some challenges, but also some opportunities for some of the companies that are looking to partner in this space. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Fern. George, final thoughts, advice for people seeking investment and just moving towards that stage?
I think first piece of advice is to listen to the advice of the investors, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to give you the money. So definitely listen to that. So coming from the sort of entrepreneur side, don't give up. You know, I think it can be tough sometimes. It is like speed dating. You're going to speak to a lot of people, and sometimes it can be demoralizing. But ultimately, you really only need one yes, because it's often that first investor who comes in, who gives credibility, does the due diligence, and that will snowball into a proper round. And you know, remember, a lot of people have been there before you, and a lot of people have succeeded. It is possible. So keep at it whilst listening to the feedback of the people you're speaking to. You know, I think that's crucial, because your message should always be evolving, because your company's always evolving. So don't give up. And as I said earlier, you know, kiss a lot of frogs. I know that some people like to look at fundraising as a, you know, to use a sniper rifle approach. So this is the investor I want, and go for them. And others like to use, you know, a Kalashnikov or whatever, and just spray and see what sticks. And for me, I think the it's somewhere in the middle, really, because having a bit of breadth in what you're looking for and who you're speaking to, I think brings a lot of value in helping you understand more about your own offering and how people feel about it, how people are hearing it, reacting to it. But you do need to know and have a very clear idea of what the perfect investor looks like for you, who they are, what they've done before in their portfolio, and what's really going to make them tick in terms of your own opportunity. So somewhere between those two. And that's, that's probably my 3 key pieces of advice.
Great, fabulous. Thanks for that, George. And Matty, closing thoughts from you?
Sure, thank you. I'll just say 3 things quickly. One is, if you're a founder, make sure to balance between 2 truths. One is that you raise money when it's available, not when you need it. So sometimes, take care of opportunities when it's there, even if you don't necessarily need all of the funding at that time. But you have to balance that also with not raising too much so that you don't raise expectations beyond a manageable target in that sense, and you're not over evaluating your company. So that's number one, and find that balance and make sure you're not going off to the extreme in either of those ends. Secondly, it's been talked about, so I'm not going to go into that, but to go in and find a good strategic design partner from day one that can bring in the expertise and help you through, someone that you will not be reliant on. So you want to maintain your independence, but have their input and guidance to be able to help you bring a product to the market. And faster, I think in health tech, that's probably more important than in any other industry, perhaps. Third thing I'll mention is, really understand the alignment. We discussed this, but really understand the alignment of interests, and especially find investors that you deeply respect, because they're most likely going to be on a board, and founders sometimes have a lot of confidence, and you need to have a lot of respect for your future board members, because you have to remember that they're going to be the ones that you're accountable to. So find the right investors that you have a deep respect for, that you really appreciate their guidance and not just their cash, and that you're going to be able to take guidance from in a coachable manner in that sense, because you could see a lot of times things go wrong when a founder has too much confidence, doesn't believe that his or her board are steering them in the right direction, they're misaligned, and the founder becomes somewhat too cocky to be able to accept the guidance of their board members. And you have to understand that ultimately that's your board, and you're responsible to them. One last word with regards to investors from the investor side. Really articulate what it is as an investor that you bring to the table for founders. So really spell that out. We have great investors in the Israel Biotech Fund, and what they say is a great pitch. They say, we know how to build companies and have expertise in the biotech space, and we bring in experts from the ex-CEO of Celgene, ex-CEO of Pfizer, and to sit on your board and to help you succeed. And we know the Israeli biotech scene, but we also know the US one. They're able to articulate the expertise they bring within a very quick elevator pitch. I think not just tech companies need to have an elevator pitch, but the investors do as well, and to stay within that focus to be able to attract the best companies to invest in that sense. So that's what I'd say.
Great, thanks very much for that, Matty. James.
Yeah, a lot of great comments made so far. I love being on calls where I'm learning something as we go as well. So look, from our standpoint, this is all about people. The most important thing that we look at is the founder. I'd much rather bet on a founder in a bad market than a founder that we don't like in a good market. You have to believe that the best companies are led by people who have a very personal reason that drives them to solve the problem that they have set out to solve. It may be an experience they've had, an afflicted family member, or another reason, but having a personal relevant story as to why you set out on the mission is critical, because money follows mission. We also look at mindset. And we have a very detailed scorecard on how we evaluate our entrepreneurs and the merits of investing in them or bringing them into our ecosystem and community. So having a mindset that makes you anti-fragile, where you don't just navigate challenges and failures, but use them as a launching off point for learning and growth. One that we term as being batteries included, where you bring positive energy to every situation you're involved in. You know, is this a coachable entrepreneur? Do they have a value creation mindset? How committed are they? Is this a side job or are they all in? You know, we then look at the company itself and rate, you know, them on another scorecard. How bold is their vision? Is the team backable? How differentiated is the idea? How much traction do they have? You know, Fern had made this point before. How much traction do they have, or how much forward progress are they making? And finally, and I think Maddie hit on this a bit, you know, we look at whether the investment is actually a fit for our philosophy, our core values, and who the co-investors are, and how helpful we think we can be in that syndicate. So, you know, entrepreneurs need to understand they're about to go through what's really a rigorous and detailed process, but it's one that at the end of the day, hopefully aligns interest between investor and entrepreneur. And I really like what George said about being in the middle of, you know, kissing a lot of frogs and what we call kissing the right frogs, because I've seen entrepreneurs over and over again. You'll talk to one and they're like, great, we launched our process to raise money, but they didn't really launch a process. They just started having meetings with VCs or investment partners, and 6 months down the road, they still don't have a term sheet, and they've spoken to 90 different people, so they're distracted from their business. And so I think the final piece of it is like, run a process and stick to that process. And then at the end of the process, if you're left without investment, evaluate and adjust and do it again. It's important that the entrepreneur be in charge and, you know, of that process, so it's not in charge of them, if that makes sense.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Jamie. David, final few words of advice.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate exactly what Jamie and the other members of the panel have said, but what Jamie said about the process is really important. It's a long run process. Raising money always takes time, but you need to, more importantly, focus on the business. I've seen lots of companies that have got excited in their fundraising process, and then the next quarter the sales or the development has gone down because they haven't been able to focus on the business. So having the two key points I really want to make, and this is where we at Tyson and Blake have been able to assist companies. The first is the team. Yes, the founder is really important. He has to be inspirational. He has to guide the team, but it's the rest of the team. And that includes advisors and investors. And everybody needs to be working together, particularly on a long-running project such as a biotech or health tech business. So the team is really essential. Having the experience to give investors that confidence, having investors that can really add value is really important to get that next round of funding at a higher valuation, because that's the goal of everyone. The second point that I wanted to mention is preparation. Everyone's running around with an early stage company, but being prepared for that next funding round is really key. You don't want to be bureaucratic, as I mentioned before, but get all the ducks in a row, as we say, so that when that opportunity arises, you're very quick to execute, and then you can move on with developing the business. Meet those expectations, don't overpromise, and you will be successful.
Excellent. Thanks for that, David. And James from Hill Dickinson, you get the last word. Final thoughts?
Oh, thank you, Alistair. No pressure. No, and just to reiterate, David, actually, the ducks in a row point, absolutely key, hasn't been mentioned yet. As a lawyer, I would say that get your ducks in a row, really, really key. Keep all your records nice and clean in one place, so that it's easy for you going forwards. Don't feel you need to raise all the funds at once. Do just get some funds into the company you know, as I said before, once you've got some funds in, it tends to be easier for you to raise further funds. Investors generally more receptive to businesses that have already raised some funds. Confident, you know, that it is a buoyant market. Yes, absolutely take the point that people are taking a little bit more time perhaps to close rounds and doing a little bit more due diligence than they might have done before. But it is still a good market, and there's plenty of money around. Final thing to say is ESG, which we haven't mentioned, I don't think, as such yet. It's becoming so much of an important piece to bear in mind at the moment. So do bear that in mind. And as a health tech or biotech business, it's quite easy actually, because naturally speaking, you as a business are very much in that space, and particularly the likes of corporate venture arms are looking to do more and more with respect to ESG. So definitely include a piece on that in your pitch deck.
Great, thanks for that, James. I'd like to thank everybody that's taken the time to watch what I think has been a fabulously instructive and wide-ranging discussion today. I'd like to thank all of our panelists. The amount of knowledge and experience and insight we've had today has been stunning. For all those that are watching, please have a look at the content that we'll upload onto the Health Tech World site and platform. It'll also be available on YouTube, LinkedIn, and all the other social media channels, and share it as widely as you can. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion today. Thanks once again to all of our panelists. We'll be holding more of these events in the months ahead, so please keep tuned into the HT World site for details. And enjoy the rest of your morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.